Susan, Brian, let's see. We'll get started. I know. All right, we're good. We're good. We're recording, so everybody's good on that. Whatever that edict was a few years ago. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody here and there. And I think Don has some introductions of new folks later on as part of your update. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started, and approval of our minutes from the June meeting. I think all those were emailed out. Any questions or corrections? Peggy always does such a wonderful job of following and herding cats with these minutes. We just need a motion to accept the minutes. Okay, thank you, Susan. Which second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. All in favor? Approving as presented? Aye. Say aye. Wait.
Aye.
Wait. All right, thank you as always. And this is easy because now I turn it over to Don for Food Center Authority updates and new people and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, everybody on the remote. Nice to see you guys, and thank you all for coming today. The first thing I want to do is introduce a new member of our organization. Anu is down there, and he is our new human resource manager. We had Amy Broadwater, who was our previous human resource manager, and she took retirement. So she qualified for retirement and decided now was a good time. So she retired, and now we have Anu. And I will say that his background and everything is wonderful. And the most impressive thing I like about Anu is what his personal goals are and his approach to human resource management and that sort of thing. So we're introducing him. If you want to stand up so the people in there can see who you are. Yeah. And I'm going to release him because he's got work to do. But thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Anybody have any brief questions for? I just want to let you all know.
Where do you work in Greece? So I have a military background. I'm doing HR. I have just gotten out of military, but in July. I was stationed in Texas, San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston. I'm still technically on my terminal leave. This is due to end on September 22nd. So very fresh out of the military, have a military background. What I did in the Army was very similar to what I'm going to be doing over here. So, of course, with a lot of differences, but definitely excited to be part of this team.
I will say, from my experience with Anu, he has a very high EQ, emotional he has the personality that's perfect for human resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Well,
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go in, and you're going to hear from three of us. You'll hear from Angela, and then you'll hear from Gary. And I'm going to start with my updates. We have a new board member. And it's Geraldo. Yeah, no D, it's an R. Geraldo. And so, do you want to say anything about, give a little bit of background on me?
Sure. My name is Gerardo Martinez. I'm actually a farmer in Anne Arundel and in Charles County. I also host an international conference centered around agriculture and the environment. So that's kind of like how we got all around the state. But yeah, I'm just like super excited to be in this. I'm really focused on food. I'll be speaking at COP28 this year in Dubai, which is the United Nations Climate Summit, and it's all centered around food. So that is who I am. I also have a military background. I'm a Naval Academy grad. And
What do you farm?
So, my farm in Edgewater is mainly livestock production, horse breeding. And then my farm in Charles County, which is in Waldorf, is all organic produce.
About how many acres do you have? And
So in total production of 35.
okay,
And we're on a pretty aggressive track to get more. There's a serious deficit in the age of farmers. Usually the youngest one in the room by like 20 years. So we're really focused on trying to acquire land. Eventually have a training program and place new farmers that are younger on the way and then sell it. Yeah, that's kind of our business model.
All right, well, thank you.
Have you interacted with the food center authority?
Never like, other than getting a tour, we haven't interacted. I do work with large international distributors, we can conference, one of the largest ones for this year, and that's sponsored, so Rio Grande Foods. And they cater to Salvadoran population, which compromises 70% of Latinx in this given area. So they're very, very big and they kind of operate outside of food center and most of the distribution centers. They're distributing in all of these things. They're located in Silver Spring.
Good question. Do you do the honey harvest farm and again?
Yeah, Anna Cheney is like a really close friend of ours. Actually, just got off the phone with her. We're a little different because we cater to families, so we have our own market. We have actually on my farm right now. We got a bond bill last year. We're building a 7-day-a-week farmers market with a commercial kitchen, so farmers can come and do everything from cleaning to packaging to doing value added, and then distribute it right away in the market downstairs. So Anna and I are really close. She's in a different set of the market. She caters to roller derbies and stuff like that, but we cater to kids.
Yeah, when we sat down, we were talking, there was a lot of crossover that we were surprised that we hadn't met before. The board may recall that I was a significant help to Senator Hester and Delegate Charcuti, and we submitted a bill that was designed to help farmers as a group develop some kind of a collection facility and processing facility, and we also put a requirement onto state agencies to try. They have a goal of 20% of their food purchases going to local farmers, and then we define local farmers as those farmers that abide by Maryland's nutritional runoff program. Because Maryland apparently has the strictest of all the states that border the bay. So on one hand, the farmers were not totally happy about it, but on the other hand, Maryland is the least contributor to, I guess, was the nitrogen in the bay. So yeah, and so I'm also an ex officio on Marbidco board, and so when we were talking, Marbidco allocates about $500,000 a year to help farmers provide, purchase refrigeration, but they have to demonstrate that it isn't just for their farm, it's for several different farmers. That's all I got to say on that. Any other questions?
Tom, do we have other open board seats right now?
No, I don't think so. I think we're all cool. Yeah. Okay, so the next item I want to talk to you about is Bioenergy Devco. And I'm going to repeat a lot of things you've heard because some of you are new, and so Bioenergy Devco is the recycler that's in the food center, and they take organic waste and they process it, and they generate a lot of methane gas, and that methane gas is then shipped over across one of their streets within the site to a facility that's owned by BG&E, and it scrubs the methane gas and it converts it to like a natural gas, and then they sell it to consumers for housewarming. And the only byproduct that comes out is a very high grade fertilizer additive. So they pump that into rail cars and are able to ship it out, and there's a market. So it's a pretty self-contained recycling center. And so we take a lot of the waste out of the produce market and we take it over to the operation there. And
Had a
And, yeah.
huge cost savings. for the
Yeah,
tenants.
huge, yeah.
To take a ton of trash to the landfill is about $150 per ton. To take a ton to the anaerobic digester is $55 per ton.
Wow.
And the last meeting, I told you that they were talking about possibly wanting to exercise their right to extend their options on the lease, because the bank that financed the construction of their facility wanted to make sure that they were going to have access to that land for the period of time that was under their financing scheme. So they exercised all their options and that particular issue is now resolved.
And they're under lease until February 26, 2048.
Yeah.
So our county records will indicate that they have exercised those options.
Anybody think I'll be in here in 2048?
Maybe.
Yeah. I know I'll be a distant memory by then. Unless I'm lucky enough to live longer than I think. The other one is NAPCO update. So I just want to bring you up to date. There was the first building that was built, NAPCO partnered with Merit Construction Facility. And Merit was on the developers agreement with us. And Merit graciously stayed on the developers agreement long after that site was complete, in the event that we were going to develop any one of the two sites that were left. And Stanley Perlman, decided that he wanted to build his campus, and we leased the two remaining spots to him. And so we have about a 20-year lease, and I think they're going to probably want to exercise. They've been looking at whether they want to exercise their right to purchase, which is in 20 years. Well, probably at this point, 16 to 17 years. So that may be coming back to you guys in the future. But there was, when we first sold the first piece of property to them, we had all of these crisscross easements and everything, so that we would have the right, if we were building the big building that they built, we built that, and we would have the right to be able to get access to it. And then there's a site in the back over there that it's a freezer unit that they built. And we had all these easements that were getting worked out. Well, since we're no longer a participant in building anything back there, we've been working with in-house counsel, we've been working with their counsel, and we've been working with civil engineer to redo all of the plats and try and carve out the different sites. And so now we're in the process of shifting the relationship between us and NAPCO, between us, NAPCO, and the Merit product. And then there's a reforestation area that's behind the site that has to comply with the reforestation requirements set up by Howard County. And so we're still in the process of circulating documents and taking comments and getting it to where we have it fine-tuned to where everybody feels comfortable with what their responsibilities are and what their responsibilities aren't. And all of the maintenance and everything that goes on back there is based on building size. And we do have the truck wash as part of that site. So we have, like, I think it's down to 1%. Yeah, I think we had to pay 1% of the cost of the reforestation area and everything else. But if you were to drive down to the seafood market, you'll see something that's being undertaken. I'm not going to steal Gary's thunder. I'm going to let him tell you about that. So is there any questions on what's going on with NAPCO?
The good news, Don, is that there are so many people in these discussions, but we have all come to agreement. The
Yeah.
only thing we're working out right now is just the legal wording, and that's it. And we're hoping maybe we'll have that tied up today, but we'll see. But everybody wants the same thing. Everybody's already agreed to the numbers. So it's just a matter of just the last little bit of fine tuning, and then everyone's gonna sign off.
And as Angela said, it's fine tuning, but it's always an attorney wanting to wipe out this part and rewrite it. And then the impact of that can be significant. But it's like, okay, I remember we were negotiating the purchase of Rock Hall at one point, and I asked the attorney representing the seller and my attorney to sit at the end of the table, take notes. The business people will develop the agreement and then just take what we said that we're all doing and just put it into an agreement. Don't come back with all of this other stuff because we'll flesh out that arrangement and it worked out pretty good. And that's how this is going now. I think Mark and Miriam are doing an awesome job of just making sure that the authority is protected and dealing with the attorneys that represent the two other parties over there.
Don, I believe Mark Powell has a question.
Yeah, Mark.
Thank you. Don, I think I know the answer to this question, but just curious, there's the state's made it a priority to try to address blue catfish in the Chesapeake Bay. We're doing a lot of marketing at MDA, and there's concern that there's not enough processing capacity. I know Congressional NAFCO had at one point was processing blue catfish, and they've gotten out of it. Does the Food Center Authority have any way of encouraging the seafood processors there to process blue catfish?
The problem, Mark, is whether the marketplace is equipped to take the volume of blue catfish that can be harvested. NAFCO ran into the problem. They were harvesting it. They were teaching people how to cook it. They have a kitchen down in their facilities. And I was fortunate enough to go down and taste how they prepared it. And it was a wonderful fish to eat if you prepare it right. But the problem is that I think because it's a catfish, that when you try to market it, consumers may look at that differently and say, okay, catfish, I'm not sure I want catfish. I want, a good steak fish. And the blue catfish is steakable. I mean, you can cut it into steaks. And I've had a number of conversations with Stanley and Lou Furcobb. Lou Furcobb wrote a number of articles that were picked up in some of the seafood journals that circulate in our area. And he pointed out long before anybody else seemed to be aware of the nature of the blue catfish and the harm it was causing to the bay, because it has no natural predator in the bay that seeks to destroy the catfish, because the catfish has barbs on its dorsal fins and everywhere else. So it's a very difficult fish for any predator in the bay to kill off. So they're propagating pretty fast. And I know that they had arrangements with some of the higher end retailers in the area, and they were buying it, and then they stopped buying it. They found that the consumers were not purchasing it. It would be nice if we could somehow have a marketing effort aimed at consumers and get them on board with wanting to buy it. But Stanley says when he puts the word out to the watermen, they overwhelm them with product. I mean, it's an easy product to get out of the bay. They're very in they're large numbers, and he says we get quickly overwhelmed with supply, and then we don't have the demand for the product that can keep up with what they purchased. So, but I do know that Lou Furcott that works for Stanley, is what got Stanley involved in the blue catfish originally, and he's concerned about the damage that the blue catfish is doing to our striped bass and everything else. So he's a true advocate. But you know, it's one thing to catch the fish, but it's another thing to be able to sell it, and that's left up to the consumer. And I think a lot of consumers are unfamiliar with the blue catfish, and so they would rather purchase a fish that they're very knowledgeable about rather than trying to try something new. And I think that's the biggest problem, is we just don't have, the consumers are just not aware of how tasty the fish is. Those of us that live in the industry, we know, but the average consumer is unaware of the blue catfish and the damage it's doing to our bay. And so it'd be nice if we could somehow educate the consumer that if you buy blue catfish and you eat it, that you're part of the solution to the propagation of the fish. So, but that's from Stanley, and I'm sure that they would be happy to educate anybody who wants to be educated on the blue catfish.
We
they have,
Don,
yeah.
just so you're aware, we are doing a pretty significant promotional educational campaign on blue catfish.
Okay.
The Department of Ag, and there are 4 processors in the states currently without NAFCA. I was just curious if there was, you know, any way to encourage them to get back in that business, but it sounds like they just can't market the fish then.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, they're, you know, they want to make money, and if a consumer demands the fish, they'll process it, and they can process a lot. They have the capacity to do a lot of processing. They do mostly salmon, but their machines and everything can handle just about any kind of fish. And I do know that they were supplying some of the higher end retailers in our area. And I don't feel comfortable about mentioning them, but you know, I don't want to interfere with his relationships with his customers. Okay. But yeah, it's the blue catfish is really a problem for the bay. And
as far as what we can control, I
Yeah.
can't think of anything in the lease that would,
yeah,
we would have any say over what they're going to do.
yeah. But Stanley is very much aware of the problem. They're very concerned about it from a consumer point of view. I mean, they worry about, you know, the destruction that the blue catfish is causing to the striped bass in the Chesapeake Bay, and the Chesapeake Bay has been long known for the rockfish. So, you know, it's
Okay.
But if anybody, you know, in your marketing department or anything wants to know some of the challenges they've had in marketing the blue catfish, I'm sure they would be happy to talk to you about it.
Carrie just mentioned that the Severn Inn has it on its menu. Oh, Severn Inn does. Cool.
Yeah.
We also are doing, I mean, Mark, it's been great for us. I work with Maryland Agriculture Council, and we market it. We are really pushing it through our avenues as well. So there is, Mark and his team have done a great job of really pushing the blue catfish, but it's, I mean, it's different. It's a different choice for people. So it's just not quite caught on. But if there's anything, you know, that we all can maybe work together to do, that would be fantastic. But they're doing a great job of marketing from there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean it's critical of your marketing efforts. I'm just saying that I think
It's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah, and I think I'll bring it up to the Marbidco people and see whether or not they want to look at a specific program for the harvesting of the catfish too. So
We can't change the name, can we, Mark?
Yeah.
In creative,
yeah,
back in the olden days when we named courses conservation, and then we put the E word and called them environmental stewardship, enrollment went up 1,000%. Can we change the name of catfish?
Yeah, I mean, call it the good tasting blue, you know, I mean, yeah.
There you
Not
go.
get, you've got good people
Yeah.
that I'm sure have already thought of those creative ideas, but it, yeah,
I agree.
It's the
That's a
name.
great idea.
a new naming contest, Mark.
Yeah,
A new costume for somebody at MDA to wear to promote it. There you go. He'll never miss another meeting.
I had a question, for Mark Powell. Mark, I've just heard that with catfish and it started a lot in the South and the aquaculture, that certain segments of the market, if you're gonna sell into it, you have to have a USDA inspector, almost like the meat industry.
Yeah.
So like catfish has its own special USDA requirements, and I think if you want to sell to retailers or freeze the product, it's different than selling to restaurants. So I don't, and there's not a lot of processors for seafood that are USDA.
Yeah,
Maryland.
so I mean, there are 4 currently in Maryland. There's DC has 1. I just got a list of Virginia and North Carolina processors, and they have 5. So that is true. They have to be USDA inspected. And some of the processors, at least that we've talked to, say it's a marketing advantage for them, particularly selling into international markets. That USDA logo and seal of approval is a marketing advantage. However, it does cut out the smaller, smaller processors who don't want to, deal with the USDA. But yeah, that's true. Thanks, Mark.
any other questions on the blue cat? The blue fish?
We're gonna call it.
I already mentioned that Amy retired and that Hannah's taking over that place. I'm not gonna go into any of that again. But I did want to touch on the expansion project down at the produce market. We met with our engineers and architects, and we went through and looked at the drawings that they prepared that would go out in a bid for the construction of the back dock. And we have received a $10 million grant from the state, and we also received a $1 million and $2 million, a $2 million grant from Howard County, but they're giving $1 million each year or something. And so the people who are managing the 10 million that comes to us is through the grant, through MDA, which Mark Powell is overseer of that. And Mark, are you comfortable with some of the documentation that we had to give you to make sure that that 10 million is still in reserve?
At this point, yes. We have a new procurement officer, and she has a tremendous amount of experience, and I know is working on it. So she said it's all good, and we'll probably be communicating back shortly.
Great. And so the design, obviously there's going to be some challenges. So they're going to do it in phases. And the first phase will be a great learning tool for us, because they're going to literally remove the back dock and then put in an all new, brand new dock. The back dock now is 12 feet wide, and we're putting a 25-foot wide dock on the back. And rather than retain the existing dock, which was built back in the 70s and has a lot of wear and tear on it, the idea is to remove that dock. And it's going to be a challenge because of the way the building was built structurally. So a lot of the things that will end up possibly being extras or whatever will come out in the first undertaking. So we'll be starting that in June or July is when we'll send the bids out. So we went through their presentation. We had comments on the design and some of the aspects that we were concerned about, and then we're gonna take it to the tenants. And then let them weigh in on the design and see what's gonna happen as well, because when you expand the dock 25 feet out, that affects the traffic circulation on the site. And so right now we have excess parking, which will be minimized because of the extension of the dock. And so we want to go through all of that with the tenants. And there's two different scenarios, one where they can get a little bit more parking, and the other one where the parking is less, but the chance of a truck clipping the front of a vehicle that's parked is less with the fewer parking spaces. So and that's in a perfect world. That's assuming that the driver is perfect and can pull out exactly the way that engineers look at how trucks function. And we've had a lot of experience with truck drivers that are not capable of driving their trucks the way that they need to drive their trucks. So
Our poor fire hydrants.
yeah,
Our poor fire hydrants.
fire hydrants and our transformers, I mean, we try to protect them with bollards, but you know.
They go right under the
yeah,
bollard.
They just knock them down with the truck. So is there any questions that anybody has about the expansion? It
I
will,
would like to add something to it.
Yeah.
One of the other things that will be impacted in the market is trailer park, any kind of storage trailer that'll be along the fence line currently would no longer be there.
yeah, and we'll probably have to go to an assigned parking plan, since there will be fewer parking spaces. We'll have to figure out how many parking spaces should be allocated to a particular unit. And then negotiate, have that put in the lease. Because with fewer parking spaces, if we just say, well, first come, first serve in the morning. I'll spend all my life with Gary down at the market mediating disputes and so we've been talking about having specific parking spaces assigned to tenants for quite a while now. But this will definitely push that conversation to the top of the list, because that's something that we'll have to do. So any questions from anybody up there on the expansion of the produce market?
I have one for Gary, just in the transition, let's say the bids go out and we start whenever. What kind of transition is it gonna be for, my 12-foot area to be nothing for a while before it's a 25-foot area? What's that transition gonna look like?
So that's a great question. So currently, most of the operations is on the front dock. And the rear dock is the dock that we're removing. So it won't have a huge impact. You just won't be able to go around the building. It will affect trash removal and stuff like that. But our team will coordinate all that.
Okay,
It's just the trash. That's the only real
Power.
change.
Yeah. And access to rail. I mean, we're no longer have rail coming into the market, but CSX is concerned about the limited amount of rail we get anyway, and whether or not the cost of maintaining the line, the rail line that gets into the market is exceeding the revenue that they're generating to have that. So
Just to add to that, Don, so there's no panic with the rail. We currently do have rail and it does service the A building, but it'll be one of the last areas that we'll get down.
okay.
So, and the small portion that is at the end of the building, so it'll be on the last phase. We hope.
yeah, I think we only have one or two tenants.
We have 3 total.
Yeah. But they coordinate, and it's all up at one end of the market, so we might reserve some space for a small section of the rail. The question will be, will that be enough to generate enough revenue for CSX that will continue providing rail to the site? Back in the day, it was very important to have rail because there was always flux within the trucking industry. So if the trucking industry went on strike or whatever, then they would convert to rail and vice versa. So but we believe that the expansion is going to be more advantageous to the tenant than the rail.
And Don, I think Mark has another question.
Yeah, Mark.
Thanks. Don, do you guys anticipate that this $12 million will be enough, or are you do we need to be thinking about raising more funds?
Yeah, we're gonna have to probably raise more funds. The conversation we had with the architect was to divide it up into phases. And there are a lot of unknowns because nobody really knows what's under, for example, the existing dock. You know, we don't know if we're going to run into a bunch of tree stumps, whether it was actually backfilled with good backfill. Because we ran into that problem at the seafood market, that when it was constructed, the material that was used to support the dock wasn't always the right material. And so just as an FYI to the board, one of the things we always look at during the pre-bid meetings and everything is we have to educate the potential contractors that they are going to have to work during certain times, that we don't want them interfering with the tenant's operations. We can't afford to be abating rent during this whole period of time. So there's a lot of thought and planning that goes into when they can work, how they have to work, how they have to clean up their areas and everything else. And Gary and his team is really good at being able to coordinate that with the contractors. And whenever we've done a major renovation down at the market, we always let the tenants know that we'll do our best to try and minimize the impact on their business. And that's how we approach the construction. So the first phase will tell us a lot about what to expect in the subsequent phases. And I think the estimate that they came in with was under 20 million. So, but that number can fluctuate. It could be really low or it can be high. We won't know until we do the first phase. And
then we'll have a showcase.
Yeah,
We'll have something that's tangible that people
Right.
can drive in and they can see, this is what we get and this is what it costs. Now, the first phase that we're doing though, is gonna be a little tricky because the first phase has already had an electrical upgrade and has already had the sprinklers installed. But back when this market was built, it wasn't code. You didn't have to have sprinklers. And so back in about 2009, 2010, we did update this part of the market. So we won't have to go through those costs with this phase, but we will end up with something that we will be very proud of, and we'll be able to say, this is what this costs. And that'll give us an idea of what we're going to need to go forward to continue the project.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Improvements won't be lost.
No, not at all. Everything will be there.
Do we have a site plan and elevations yet, or still working?
The civil engineering part of it, they're still working on that because we're looking at parking along the fence line and whether or not that's going to impact stormwater management and everything else. So we want to get feedback from the tenants with respect to the different parking scenarios. They laid that out. And then whatever parking scenario they choose or convince us they need, then we can decide whether or not we're going to have a stormwater management upgrade that's going to have to deal with the paving.
When the meeting that we just had with them, they have mechanical lighting, they've got everything ready. We're just not at the point yet where they're being submitted to the county for us to figure out if we've got any issues. So yes, we have our first draft.
Yeah.
Okay. You have like architectural
Yeah.
elevations, so you can see what it's gonna look like.
We
Yeah.
can, the elevation,
Yeah.
the elevation is not,
Yeah,
it's the site plan.
yeah. And the elevations they have
Rough.
they're a lot more. They can be a lot more attractive than I think that's actually going to go in.
Gotcha.
I mean, we have door issues. How many roll doors do they want per unit? Is it 2? Is it 1? Man door issues. So we need to go through that exercise with the tenants. And then once that we have a pretty good firm understanding of what we're going to put in, we'll make sure that you all get copies of the plan. So we'll go through an exercise and show you what it's going to look like, so you can kind of get an idea. And you know, as Angela pointed out, once we get one phase done, not only can we go out and then market that to people that we might be able to get additional monies from, but we can also market it to the tenants and make sure that, you know, they have comments on what it looks like, even the tenants that are gonna be using the space, and we can get some feedback from them as to whether or not the design that looks appropriate on paper is actually working in real life, so.
Don, you know what I expect? I expect the development down there to be very similar to the development we did in this area, because we did this in stages as well. And at the beginning, it was a little chaotic, and as we got to the end, we were such experts at this. We knew exactly, we were pointing things out that they weren't seeing because we had just done it several times. And so I expect it'll be just like that down there. That last phase should be the best one, because we'll be experts at it at that.
So what are the timeline goals? Like, when do you want to break ground, when phase one complete?
We would be going out, our goal now is to go out for the initial phase in June, July. And
Takes about 5 or 6 weeks for the bid process, and then you have to, whoever is the apparent winner, then you have to award, and then they have documents they need to give. Doing things, state procurement really stretches things out. But as soon as we can, we will get that shovel in the ground.
It's almost like this time next year, maybe, if things roll well from July to.
And but you also have the caveat of the county, so we have the county, so. we'll
As
keep-
well as state. Gotcha.
yeah, all of the county requirements will be done before we actually put it out for bid. But the county will be coming and doing inspections and everything else, and so as we uncover issues that may not have been thought of during the first phase, the county will then react to that with us and say, oh, you gotta modify this, you gotta modify that. So the first phase is always the most challenging. And then the contractors, even during the first phase, actually become very familiar with the operations. And they know that we want to minimize the impact on operation. So they actually come up with different ways to work with us, make sure that we're not negatively interfering with our tenants' operations, and come up with a different set of scenarios for the next phase. And as Angela pointed out, usually our last phase is one where from the ability to be able to go into a unit and identify aspects of that unit that may not have been reflected or captured in some of the research that they're doing. That's where we can point that out. I mean, Gary has caught that, you know, they want to put a control panel, you know, and the code may require the control panel to be 5.5 feet from the floor. But you're building a cooler in there, and somebody's gonna be walking between the cooler and the wall where the panel is. And it's like, now the panel's gotta be larger, or somebody's gonna knock their head into the panel as they're going back and forth through this area. So Gary has a good sense, and so does the maintenance group. They have a pretty good sense of some of the challenges that may occur if the place isn't done in exactly the way it's going to actually be used, so.
Don, we also have experience with doing these sorts of major renovation projects. We did win a silver medal one time from an international competition for completing a construction project while all the tenants were still operating. And so we submitted for that. So we do have experience with the tenants continuing to work while we do these major renovations.
Yeah, it was, there was a worldwide competition on, you know, who was able to do a major capital improvement with the least amount of effect on the tenants, and we won the award. We showed them what we did and how we worked with the tenants, how we worked with the contractor, and so we were proud to get that award. It's amazing how many markets around the world would just do the project without really any kind of consideration for their tenant operations. And so when the project's over and the contractors leave, then they have a bunch of angry tenants because it was done in a way that it could have been done different. So that's one of the areas that I feel like we're really confident in doing it. We've had roof removal projects and restoration of roofs and everything. And yeah, so we kind of know what we got to do. And our teams are always involved in the initial stages. We'll be involved, once we meet with the tenants and we start really formalizing what it's all going to look like. We'll show you guys so you can kind of weigh in from a different perspective that you might have. So, all right.
It might be helpful to have some photographs of some comparable properties that kind of encapsulate what you're trying to accomplish and maybe show that to the tenants in lieu of actual drawings.
Yeah,
To show them
it's
different
been,
buildings.
well, we've had that challenge every time that we have like a lease renewal. It's like, well, how did you come up with your rental? And trying to find comparable properties is next to impossible. There's very few, if any, properties like ours. We have multiple tenants, competitive environment, with people doing the same kind of thing, across a whole market. And you got to run the market so the guy that has the woman or man that has one unit has the same competitive advantage as someone has 12 units. And the person that has 12 units, they want to have a leg up over the person who only has one unit. And we try to make sure it's balanced because from a customer perspective, the one unit person may do a very, very good job in sourcing a specific product. And the larger tenants, that they may not have the variety of products that the customer wants. So it's been a lifelong challenge in my career to make sure that we're managing the market in a way that all of the tenants that come in have the ability to be successful. They work hard. But it's always been a challenge, even with the appraisers that we work with. They're like, okay, so they don't have, if there's a dock on the building, that may not be factored into the rental computation. We charge rent for every square inch of the market. And but then again, we don't always charge market rates. We charge rates that may be a little less to compensate for that. But it would be great, if you're aware of any properties or you see, that you come across that looks similar to what the market looks like, I'd be happy to look at it.
Yeah, I'd say you probably have to expand nationwide.
Yeah.
Sure, trying to find something.
Yeah, and that's, we ask our architects and engineers, and they actually go out and try and find comparables because it would make their life a lot easier when they're trying to design it. And they have difficult time finding comparables. And there's an international organization, but there's a national organization, which is the National Association of Market Managers. We get together at least once a year, and everybody talks about the challenges, and everybody agrees that what we build and what we manage is quite unique, which is probably why most of the markets worldwide are built and managed by some kind of municipality. It's either at the local level or at the state level. But there's some government involvement because the private sector doesn't, they build a building, they want to rent it, they want to, they don't want to see the tenant unless there's a problem or the lease expires. Where these operations require daily, significant daily involvement in their business. Any other questions on the expansion project? We'll keep you updated every meeting. I'll give you an update as to where we are.
It'll be a party when we do the groundbreaking.
Yeah.
They throw good parties.
Yeah.
They throw really good parties here. For groundbreakings and ribbon cutting.
Yeah, so
That noise was to let someone know that someone's at the door
Oh.
and they need to push the button.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there's on it.
yeah. Well, that's all I have to say as far as updates go, we will turn it over to Gary. And Gary can talk to you about a couple of projects and bring you up to date on them.
So as Don mentioned earlier, there was the NAFTA buildings that were added and building added on the back of our building. And as part of that, one of the final things that need to be completed is the sidewalks. And then there's some of you, when you came in, you can see they're out there actually installing the sidewalks as you speak. Sidewalk will obviously cross the street over to our side, run. Oh, sorry. So the sidewalk will run down the hill to our Maryland Market Center, where it will empty right into the crosswalk that goes across to our building. The other project is the Dorsey Run stream restoration. It's 90% complete. As you can see up on the screen, I hope everyone is online can see it. If you see the wooded area, so this is our produce market, building A, building B, the larger building is building B. On the backside of the market is a storm restoration. The highway that runs, or the highway, the road that runs back there is Route 1. Our produce market runs parallel with Route 1. The stream also runs parallel with Route 1. And if you look in that tree line there, you can see some broken areas. That's kind of where the stream snakes through. And what happens is once it, our area is from like Arby's down to what was formerly known as Crazy Ray's. And then our part of the stream actually empties into Crazy Ray's, which snakes through. And ultimately, because the project is called the Dorsey Run stream restoration, it empties into on the Dorsey Run Road. It's 90% complete. It is actually in Howard County at the STD for sediment and erosion control. They anticipate questions and stuff like that the first round. And then once all those questions have been answered, the company that's working with it is our stormwater consulting company who offers maintenance and stuff like for our ponds. They have a subcontractor that's actually doing design on the stream, and they're hoping to present it to Howard County soon to DPC. Yes. Yep. Sorry. Yeah.
And this board approved for that design 2 years ago, I think it was. So it's been a long project, and there's a lot of work that goes into it, and so hopefully we'll be getting the report at some point, and then we'll be able to incorporate the cost of doing the project into
correct.
the next budget.
Also, I didn't mention that we did have a community meeting, and all of the attendees for the meeting have received the meeting notes, and that's also something's in the works that hopefully will be settled soon, so we can move it on to the DPC.
Yeah, it was publicized, the requirement of Howard County that we have hold a public meeting, and several people came to that meeting, and they were people that generally had an understanding of what a stream restoration is, and they asked a lot of questions of our contractor and designer of what we were doing, and I felt that the meeting was very positive and very productive. All the questions that were asked were pretty much answered. You're looking at the stream renovation. What they're looking at is any curvatures in the stream. They put in product that on the curves that minimize further erosion, and then they sculpt out the bottom of the stream and give it some depth, which then promotes a variety of different species from entering into the stream. And they were one of the questions that was asked is, are you going to stock the stream with fish? And the answer was no. And then it was
Yes, exactly.
And then the obvious question is, well, then how are the fish going to, propagate in the stream? And it was pointed out that waterfowl often transports fish eggs from one location to another. So that's how Mother Nature takes care of its growth. And I had some familiarity with a stormwater management pond that had been stopped and they dug it all out. And it had fish, it had crayfish and everything else in it. And they removed all of that as part of the redesign of the stormwater management. And within a year, you could go down, you could still see fish swimming and crayfish walking around on the bottom. And so Mother Nature does have the ability to, regenerate the population. But at the end of the project, the stream is going to be, that section of the stream will be receive some really nice modifications to allow the stream to flow better and give some additional depth to the stream for any of the wildlife that might want to live in. And they entered the project from Route 1, and I guess from the produce market they went down. There was an access point there. And then we will get some credits from having done that we can apply to some of the other stormwater management issues that arise every year with all of our stormwater management facilities. So we're hoping that will be a good investment for us.
And Angela likes those.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, because I always say, like, why do we have to do this? Well, we have to because we're statutorily required to get a permit. And this permit requires us to get X amount of credits. And we can get them all by doing the stream restoration, or we could break it up and spend millions and millions more dollars by breaking it up into little projects, or just do the stream restoration.
So like the Arby's or the other vendors, businesses on Route 1, they're just points of reference. They're not contributing. This is the project of the
Yeah.
food center.
Food center.
Okay, it's our stream.
Yeah,
Good, bad, or indifferent.
yeah,
This is actually on.
yeah, it's also a
Okay,
problem.
okay, got it.
So,
They're just good neighbors.
any other questions on the stream renovation project? Sure.
Will there be ongoing maintenance? Do you have that plan?
Not on the stream renovation. I mean, we're not gonna, but I don't know. I mean,
There will be inspections,
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that personally, I have a farm, and so our farm did the stream restoration, so they do come out and they do periodic inspections, just to see if there's anything that needs to be worked on. Same way they come out to look at stormwater ponds, they come out regularly from the county.
Yeah, when they do all of our inspections for ponds, obviously all of our outfall go into the stream. So the stream has to continue to be adequate enough to support the amount of water that we need. And the amount of water that food center, which is our.
well, that concludes my portion of the upgrade or updates, and I'll turn it over to Angie.
Thank you, Don. I will be brief today. I can't say the same at the next meeting. The next meeting is going to be brutal, but I promise to try to make it as fun and interesting as possible. So as of right now, we are being audited because we are in the state, we run on a fiscal year. Our year ended on June 30th. For the last several years, we've been under the statewide audit contract, which has been horrible for us. And the reason why is that we weren't getting our statements. They were contractually obligated to give us the statements by September 30th. But if you were here last year, you remember, I believe we rescheduled twice into December because they still did not give us our statements. So what did we do different? We went out for bid. We have our own auditors now. And there's also a $1,000 per day liquidated damages clause. So if they don't give it to us on September 30th, it will go down every day by $1,000, the amount that we're going to pay. So fingers crossed. Still haven't seen numbers yet. I haven't seen statements yet, but I do have scheduled next Tuesday an exit conference with them. So they know it's coming. So we'll see if we get them on September 30th. And so then, like I said, at the next meeting, that's when we'll go through the budgets and we'll go through those financial statements. And that's all I have for today. Next time, buckle up.
Yes.
I will say, and kudos to Angela, she gives us like the Bible and then the condensed Bible with color codes, so that's really nice.
Yeah, that's the CPA in me.
I know, no, I appreciate that, because I'm on the floor.
So, yeah, so the next meeting, it'd be really important that everybody shows up so that you have the benefit of hearing Angela's summary of the proposed budget and any comments that were made with the audit, you can deal with those.
And we'll vote.
That is scheduled November 16th, that's right, November 16th, assuming our auditors are on. Yep.
All right, so that really concludes, we have
yeah.
a recent.
Say,
this first-
Angela has 2 more pages in here, right? The current statement of revenues and expenses for both of them on, yeah.
Right, and so the only thing I would like to say about these 2 statements is that these are under audit right now. These are not final. Usually I do not give these to you until they are final. But what I wanted to mention to the board is that at the produce market, because of increased costs for salaries, because of the need of having to get temporary labor, our costs are higher. And so what we are seeing is that at the end of June, what the statement is telling you is that the MFCA has spent $200,000 more than we have collected to cover these costs. So what did we do? Usually we would then bill the tenants over the remaining of the next fiscal year so that we get reimbursed, so that the costs and the income match and it's a net of 0. But what we did this year, because of the word that we've been getting, and I'm sure many of you in the state have been hearing it the same way, there have been some talks about budget shortfalls. And when that happens, we are at times victim of having the state coming in and sweeping cash out of our funds that the state has access to. They just take it and then reconcile the bank statement and say, whoa, that happened. So what we wanted to do is we decided to share this cost with the tenants. So the tenants are only paying for half of this. The MFCA is covering the other half of it, so that at least we're keeping that money internally and giving that back to our tenants. So that's what we decided to do. And if you go over to the next page, that's the Maryland Market Center. You will see again, it was a $50,000 deficit. We split that. And so the MFCA is paying for half of it and the tenants are only paying for half of that. I did increase the amount that I charge them monthly, so that at the end of this current fiscal year, hopefully that number will be closer to 0. We're a refund. I love when it's a refund. It's so much more fun to talk to the tenants when I'm saying, I'm giving you money. That's way better than saying, I have to charge you now for the amount that there was a deficit for last year. And we do share this information with them.
And this doesn't include rent, correct?
This has nothing to do with rent. This is just the expenses of running the.
Right, and the revenue that comes in from interest fees, registration.
From entrance fees and parking
Yeah.
and things like that.
So the tenants are gonna be very happy with the fact that we're picking up half the cost of their expenses and.
And they're very used to this process, because I've
We
been
did
20
it,
years, so
yeah.
they've been doing it for 20 years, they're very used to this. But in light of the current economic forecast, we decided, what can we do? And so that's what Don decided to do.
And we did it during the pandemic as well, and
Oh, and also, I'm sorry. Also, the thing that made it very easy for us, if they wanted to do that, I'll just tell you now. We used to have our interest swept, and then we approached the state and asked them to review again to make sure that they're allowed to be sweeping our interest. And then they came back and said, oops, nope, we weren't supposed to be. So now we do get our interest. In the last year, we collected over $600,000 in just interest that the state would just swept away from us. This is our first year of getting that. So sorry to spoil the surprise for the next meeting, but we got over $600,000.
Nice change.
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
You might have mentioned this before and I missed it. Can you say briefly why the salaries that went up so much?
Well, there was the increases, we had some employees that made significantly less than $15 an hour, and then there was the $15 initiative. So everyone had to go up to the $15. And then in addition to that, we had to hire temp workers but we still have them, because there's just not enough labor out there for us to keep security guards in 2 boxes 24/7. It takes a staff to do that and they're just not available. We have one available floater position right now, in the security guards that we're hiring.
Do the temps show up in your salaries line or your contractual service?
Contractual services, and that's why it's higher than prior year.
How many staff?
We have, I would say we have 20, because it does change. I say we have 26 pins. If you're gonna look at pins, 26 pins, but they're not all full right
And another thing was, our drivers. I mean, our maintenance guys all have Class B drivers, or at least to come in, and then we give them the opportunity to be able to get a Class B license. And there was a shortage of drivers during the whole supply chain fiasco, and so there were people that were trying to poach our people. And they were able to snag one or two, and then we raise the salaries to make sure that they're not just buying our people. Because our drivers, yes, they drive, and they also have to do other things in the market. So they're not just pure drivers, but the benefit is that they're at home every day at a certain time. They're not having to do a 10-hour drive somewhere and then come back and whatever. So that usually has a real negative effect on us because they know we have some drivers, and all I have to do is come in and try to offer them a higher salary, and our drivers, look at it. And they'll look at the short-term view, which is, I may be vested in the retirement program, but I'm not going to retire for another 25 years. So, I'll make it up somewhere else, and but that's our biggest challenge. And this area particularly is difficult to find labor because the housing market in this area is quite expensive. Due to Columbia and some of the growth that is coming out onto Route 1, it's hard to find a place that is affordable for the driver salary. And so they have a difficult time even getting out to us.
So there are benefits and there's negatives of being a state person, like you say to, I'll call them a kid, but they're not, if you say to a kid, we're gonna take 7% of your paycheck, but don't worry, you're gonna get it a long time from it. They don't like that, but I wanna survive today, I need to go to the grocery store today, what is my net check? Where then they can go down the street and they can get paid the same dollar rate, but they're gonna have that net pay be way higher. Now, when they're 65 and they want to retire, they'll be so happy they did this part. But in that reality of today, it's really hard to see that big.
All right, so any questions about anything that you heard today?
Motion to approve the R&D.
Oh,
We need one though.
yes.
Can we have a motion?
Can we have a motion to approve them together?
Approve the R&Ds.
Approve the R&Ds as presented. Your motion.
So moved.
Susan, thank you. Second. Somebody up there?
I'll second it, Gail.
Thank you, Jim. All right, second by Jim. I think we've had discussion. All in favor? Approved?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Okay. That concludes.
Food.
Oh, yeah, we have food out in the production area of our facility back here, so we invite all of you to grab some food before you leave. We like to think that when people join the food center authority, that we live up to the name. So, yeah.
And for the most important motion of the day, we need a motion to adjourn.
Yes. Anybody on the screen or here?
So moved.
So,
Mr. Powell?
I'll second.
All right, thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's throwing now. Who we get? Say it.
You got it?
Now we're fighting.
Who you got? Yeah, get it. All righty, all in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Good to get
Thank you guys on
back
the
in the groove.
I know
And,
that it's a bit of a challenge to have to sit through an entire meeting on a Zoom. We appreciate your involvement and